let's move on to the next kind of a maxim. Now, this name is little tongue twisting, but you have to understand, and eventually you will come out like a fluent one. Actio personalis moritur cum persona. So it means a personal right of action dies with a person. The actions of tort are destroyed by the death of injured or the injured party. The cases cannot be passed over to the next person other than the person himself. Besides this, an action may be brought by the personal representatives of the deceased. The maxim was first used in 1496, where a woman died before paying the charges on her for defaming someone, and hence the maxim was applied and the tortfeasor could not recover the damages. Though it was first used by the King's Bench in Clement versus Vincent, 1523, it was popularized with cases like Bain's case, Pynchon's case, etc. In Pynchon's case, it was ruled that contractual liability was transmittable. If the debtor had died, but the collateral promises get over with the death of debtor, one of the founding case of the maxim, Actio personalis moritur cum persona, is Hambly versus Tort. In this case, the defendant had appropriated some animals from the plaintiff and then died without returning them. The plaintiff was ultimately unsuccessful in getting damages due to application of Actio personalis moritur cum persona. It was held that if the case would have been on some property, a definite cause of action arises. But as the case was against a person and not with a property, the case cannot be passed over and will get over as soon as the plaintiff or defendant dies. So I hope you got this one, isn't it? So just simply remember that a personal right of action dies with a person, and it is always applicable with a person only and not a property. Let's move on to the next one. The next maxim is ex turpi causa non oritur action. Now, this particular maxim means from a dishonorable cause an action does not arise, which means that the plaintiff would not be able to recover damages if it arises having in connection with illegal activity. So, this maxim is a Latin phrase and this is also called as illegality defense. So, in case of Holman versus Johnson, it was ruled by Lord Mansfield that the case brought by the plaintiff was involved with illegal activity, and the illegal activity in this case was smuggling. That's right. On the part of the plaintiff, and hence he cannot claim damages from the defendant. In this case, the plaintiff sold a large quantity of tea to the defendant on a bill of exchange, which he knew was further going to be involved in a smuggling business. The defendant was unable to honor the bill, and hence the plaintiff brought a suit in the court, which was duly rejected on the grounds of ex turpi causa non oritur action. An illegal contract is not at all enforceable in the law of contracts. A wrong act in itself which leads to a further wrong cannot be pleaded in the court. The very act is the genesis of the many wrongs and hence is not enforceable in law. From such a base, no cause of action will arise. So, this is what is ex turpi causa non oritur action. Now, let's move on to the second last maxim of today's class, innuendo. Innuendo. I think you have heard earlier. It is relatable to which kind of a tort? Can you tell me? That's right, defamation. So, something not explicitly stated but has a secondary defamatory meaning. Innuendo is a defamatory statement made by the defendant which may not be a defamatory one but an innocent one, but which contains a secondary meaning enough to make it a defamatory or derogatory statement. This particular maxim was very well explained in one of the leading cases known as Morrison versus Ritchie. In this case, the newspaper company published that Mrs. Morrison has given birth to two twins, but when actually she has married only 3 months ago. Though, in a common notion, the statement is not defamatory, but if the full facts are known, the statement is definitely derogatory on a lady and hence defamatory. So, there are two kinds of innuendo. There are two types of innuendo. There can be a true innuendo, there can be a false innuendo. Now, what is a false innuendo? So, alternatively, the meaning of which the ordinary reasonable person can read between the lines or infer from the words. This is a false innuendo. What is a true innuendo? This is where the words appear to be innocent to some people but appear to be defamatory to others because they have special knowledge or extra information. An example of this would be somebody who is said to be getting married, which would not be defamatory to majority of readers, but it would be to the readers who knew that the person was already married and as such would be committing bigamy. So this is what is the difference between true and a false innuendo. Now let's also have some light upon the publication. Now, words need to be published to a third party. The Defamation Act does provide a defense to persons who are not authors, editors, or commercial publishers if they took reasonable care in the publication and didn't know or had any reason to believe that what they had done had contributed to the publication of a defamatory statement. This covers printers, distributors, online device providers, etc. An internet service provider (ISP) who provides news content is not deemed to have behaved defamatory. If, however, once notified of offending material, the provider fails to remove, then it would not have acted reasonably and above defense would then not be available. So there is another case coming up. You must have learned it before. Cassidy versus Daily Mirror. The newspaper company in this case published that the picture of plaintiff's husband with a girl posing with him, stating that they both were engaged. The plaintiff, who was the actual wife, got enraged, and everyone in the society started thinking bad about her and her relationship with her husband and hence sued the newspaper company. She was entitled to get damages. Kind of a funny, but very defamatory and derogatory for a girl and for her husband in a relationship. All right. So I think I have made my point how innuendo can lead you into a lot of trouble, and especially these newspapers who I don't know what they publish every time. They have to be really careful, right? Now let's come on to the last part of our video lecture. That is the